Welcome to Karma Chronicles. Please like the video and subscribe. Let's begin.
The call came just after midnight. I was half asleep, phone vibrating on the nightstand like it was shaking me on purpose. My dad's voice was cold as ever. "Your mother's in the hospital, coma. Come if you want." That was it. No details, no emotion. "My name's Olivia Westbrook. I'm 33 years old, living in Atlanta now. I hadn't been back to our family home in Chapel Hill, North Carolina in almost 4 years. That drive up I-85 felt like it took forever, and every mile closer twisted my stomach tighter. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked exactly the same. White columns, trimmed hedges, not a damn thing out of place. But stepping inside, it felt like walking into someone else's house. My dad barely looked up from his coffee in the kitchen. My older brother Daniel nodded once and went right back to his phone. No hugs, no, "How are you holding up?" Just silence and stiff shoulders. Before we go further, quick note. Before listening, share which city or country you're watching from. The nurse at the hospital led me down the hallway like I was just another visitor. "She's stable, but unresponsive," she said softly. "Family can sit with her." I didn't say anything, just nodded and pushed open the door to room 214. There she was, my mother. Gray-skinned, tubes in her mouth, eyes closed like she was just taking a nap she never planned to wake up from. I pulled the chair close, sat down, and took her hand. It was ice cold. "I'm here, Mom," I said, voice cracking. "I don't know if you can hear me, but I came." I sat there for hours, just talking, about work, about the weather, dumb stuff really. I told her I missed her, that I wished we'd talked more, that I never understood why everything always felt off between us, but I never stopped trying. She didn't move, not once. By sunrise, she was gone. "Peaceful," the nurse said. "Quiet." It didn't feel peaceful to me. That night back at the house, I went to grab a glass of water and passed by my dad's study. The door was cracked. I stopped when I heard Daniel's voice. She should have known this would happen. Mom never fit in, never belonged in this family, and she knew it. Dad's voice came next. "She was never one of us. Olivia's just like her, always reaching for something that's not there." My throat closed up. I backed away slowly, glass still in my hand, barely breathing. I walked straight out to the porch and sat there in the dark, shaking. All those years trying to feel close to them. All the birthdays, holidays, fake smiles. None of it meant anything. I was never part of their world. And now, I wasn't sure I ever really had a family to begin with. I didn't sleep at all that night. I stayed on the porch until the sun came up, still gripping that glass of water like it was holding me together. The house behind me was dead quiet, but the silence didn't feel respectful. It felt like a vacuum. Like the moment she died, whatever warmth she brought into this place vanished with her. The funeral was set for noon. Small, private, just family, and a few longtime acquaintances. I got dressed in the same black dress I wore to a coworker's wedding 2 years ago. I hadn't packed anything appropriate. I didn't think I'd be burying my mother the day after she slipped into a coma. The Westbrooks don't do grief. My dad didn't shed a tear. Daniel looked like he was heading to a business meeting. When I walked into the church, neither of them even looked my way. I sat 2 pews behind them like I didn't belong up front. The pastor's words were generic. "She loved deeply, gave freely, will be missed." No real stories, no emotion. It felt like someone reading a script about a stranger. My mother wasn't perfect, but she was human. She deserved more than a template. After the eulogy, a few people came up to say awkward things like, "She always had a lovely garden," or "You look so much like her." I nodded, thanked them, smiled just enough to be polite, then stepped outside before I lost it. The chapel's side door led to a small garden area. I stood there, arms crossed, staring at a dying rosebush. The wind cut through my dress. I wanted to scream, but all I did was press my hands against my face and try to breathe. Then I heard them. My father and Daniel. Their voices carried through the cracked window. "She wanted to exclude Olivia from the estate," my father said calmly, like he was talking about cutting someone from a guest list. Daniel scoffed. "Honestly, it's for the best. Olivia never fit the mold. She was always too emotional, too different. You know Mom pitied her." There was a pause. "Glad she finally came around before the end," my dad added. "She did the right thing." I froze. My ears started ringing. My chest went numb, then hot, then cold again. I couldn't move. I couldn't even think straight. My mother planned to leave me nothing, After all the time I spent trying to keep some kind of relationship with her? After all those calls she never returned? The visits she always made excuses to avoid. They kept talking, voices fading as they walked away. I didn't follow. I just leaned against the wall, staring at the dirt. I waited until most people had left before walking back inside. My dad was talking to one of his old colleagues about golf. Daniel was scrolling through his phone. Neither of them looked up as I passed. I walked up to the casket one last time. It felt like I was standing in front of a locked door. Whatever chance I had to get answers died with her. The funeral director asked if I wanted a flower from the arrangement. I shook my head and walked out. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. But something inside me shifted, like a door cracked open in my chest and let all the heat out. I got in my car, locked the doors, and just sat there. They didn't just bury my mother. They buried every lie they told me about what this family was supposed to be. I didn't go back to the guest room. I couldn't sit with the silence, not after what I'd heard in the garden. I waited until the house got quiet again. No voices, no footsteps. My dad and Daniel were meeting the attorney to finalize whatever cold business needed sorting after a death. I knew I had maybe an hour, maybe less. I walked straight to my parents' bedroom and shut the door behind me. The air in there was stale, neat as always. Pillows perfectly fluffed, bedspread tucked tight. Nothing looked out of place, but something had to be. I started at the nightstands. Nothing but a couple old paperbacks and a Bible that looked untouched. I moved to the dresser, pulling drawers halfway out, careful not to make noise. Socks, ties, receipts, useless. Then I spotted it. A locked drawer beneath the bottom cabinet. The kind of drawer you forget about unless you're trying to hide something. I tugged. Locked. I scanned the room and saw the key on the top shelf of the closet, wedged behind a shoebox. It was taped to the side like he thought no one would ever look that deep. I slid it into the lock, heard the soft click, and pulled the drawer open. Inside was a brown folder marked in red pen, "Confidential." My chest tightened. I sat down on the edge of the bed and opened it. Medical records, old ones, from when I was born. Hospital forms, discharge papers, then something that stopped me cold, a DNA test. My hands shook as I read the line. Paternity excluded with 99.99% certainty. Test date, 2 months after I was born. Father listed, Charles Westbrook, mother Margaret Westbrook, child Olivia Westbrook. I stared at it. I reread it 5 times. I couldn't make the words mean anything else. My dad wasn't my dad. That's why. That's why he never looked at me the same way he looked at Daniel. That's why he always kept his distance. That's why I was always the outsider, the mistake he tolerated. I kept flipping through the folder, and near the back was an envelope with my name on it. My mother's handwriting, shaky but familiar. I opened it. My Olivia, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and there's no way to explain this face to face. I found out the truth about your paternity shortly after you were born. I kept it from Charles to protect what little peace we had left. But he found out anyway. He stayed, but everything changed between us. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to feel like a product of betrayal. You were never that. You were the best thing I ever did. I loved you more than anything, and I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from the distance that grew in this house. I hope one day you can understand why I stayed silent, why I tried so hard to hold it together. Love, Mom. I sat there frozen. The edges of the letter cut into my fingers from how hard I was gripping it. My heartbeat was pounding in my ears. She'd known the whole time. He had too. That's what they were punishing me for, being a reminder of a mistake they both buried. I wasn't just the outsider emotionally. I wasn't even his daughter. The anger hit first. Then the sadness crashed over it like a wave. I couldn't tell which was worse. I folded the letter and tucked it into my coat pocket. Then I looked around the room. The wedding photos, the spotless furniture, the framed portrait of our perfect family on the dresser, and felt like I was standing in the middle of a museum built on lies. I put everything back exactly where I found it. Locked the drawer, hid the key, walked out without looking back. The stairs creaked under my feet, but no one was home yet. I went back to the guest room and sat on the edge of the bed, letter in my hand, heart completely hollow. They lied to me for 33 years, and I still didn't even know who I really was. I didn't move from that bed for a long time. The letter stayed crumpled in my hand, my fingers stiff and white-knuckled around it. I wasn't crying. I wasn't even breathing right, just sitting there, stunned, like I'd been dropped into someone else's life by mistake. But then I thought, if that letter existed, what else had she left behind? I slipped out of the room, quiet, careful. The house still felt empty, but I didn't trust anything anymore. Not walls, not doors, not silence. Her study was down the hall from the kitchen. I'd always been told not to touch anything in there growing up. "That's your mother's space," my dad would say, like her thoughts were something sacred, until she wasn't around to defend them. The room was small, crowded with bookshelves and half-filled notebooks. I sat at the desk, pulled the drawer open, and started digging. Old receipts, charity letters, a birthday card I'd made her in second grade. She'd kept it all this time. Then I found them. 4 leather-bound journals, tucked behind a stack of church newsletters. I opened the first one. Her handwriting was tight and anxious, not neat, not the way she signed holiday cards or grocery lists. This was her real voice. June 12th, 1991. Charles barely looked at Olivia tonight. I tried to talk to him, tried to tell him she needs us both. He walked out of the room. I flipped forward. August 3rd, 1993. Daniel is starting kindergarten. He looks so much like his father. Olivia is quieter lately. I think she feels it. The difference? I can't undo the past, but I hate how she notices. Each page hurt more than the last. It wasn't just guilt. She was drowning in it. Trying to hold together a marriage and a lie. Trying to protect me and survive him at the same time. November 9th, 1999. Sometimes I wish I'd run, taken Olivia and left before it all calcified. But where would we go? What would she grow up believing? She stayed for me. She stayed because she thought giving me a name, a house, a normal family was better than the truth. But it didn't protect me. It turned me into an outsider in my own life. I opened the last journal and found a folded piece of paper stuck between the final pages. The ink was faded, the words trembling. "Olivia, I wanted to tell you so many times." But I kept thinking, not now. Not when you're 10 or 15 or graduating high school. I kept putting it off, telling myself it was for your good, that you didn't need the truth if it meant breaking your heart. But I see now that hiding it didn't spare you. It only made you doubt yourself. You were never the mistake. You were the reason I kept going. I hope one day you can forgive me. Love, Mom. I read it twice, 3 times. My hands started to shake. She'd been trapped too, caged by this family, just like I was. Trying to protect me while getting crushed between my father's coldness and her own regret. She wanted to tell me. She just never had the strength to actually do it. And now, she was gone. I sat back in the chair, head leaning against the wall, clutching the paper like it might fall apart if I let go. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to hug her. I wanted answers and comfort and time, none of which I'd ever get now. Her silence wasn't betrayal, but it still hurt like hell. I looked around the room again, her world, her one space where she could be honest, even if it was only to a blank page. She stayed in this house for 33 years, sacrificing her voice, her truth, her happiness, all so I wouldn't feel alone. And somehow, I still ended up alone anyway. I stayed in that study until I heard the front door creak open. Voices drifted in. My father and Daniel, talking about parking logistics and leftover food like we hadn't just buried the woman who kept this whole family from splintering years ago. I stood up, grabbed the letter from my lap, and tucked it into my pocket. I didn't care if my hands were shaking. I wasn't going to sit in this house one more minute pretending like I didn't know what they'd done, what they all chose to hide. I found them in the kitchen. My father was pouring himself a scotch at 2 in the afternoon like it was just another Sunday. Daniel had already loosened his tie and kicked off his shoes like he was done performing. They both looked up when I walked in, briefly. "I need to talk to you," I said. My father didn't respond. He took a sip of his drink and turned to the sink. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "About what?" "You know what?" I snapped. "I found the letter. I found the test. You both knew. You knew I wasn't his biological daughter, and you let me grow up in this house thinking something was wrong with me." My father let out a quiet breath through his nose. "That was a long time ago, Olivia. It doesn't change anything now." "Doesn't change anything?" I laughed once, bitter. "It explains everything. Why I was treated like a damn tenant in this family instead of a daughter." He finally turned to face me. "Your mother made her choices. We all had to live with them," Daniel cut in. "Why are you dragging this up now? She's gone. Let it go. I just found out I've been lied to for 33 years. You think I'm supposed to just light a candle and move on?" "You're being dramatic," Daniel said, folding his arms. "It's not like you didn't have a roof over your head, clothes, school. What exactly are you owed?" I stared at him. This wasn't about money. It was about the truth, about not being treated like some embarrassing secret the family couldn't wait to forget. My father rolled his eyes. You were raised under my roof. You had everything you needed. No, I said, stepping forward. I needed parents. I needed honesty. I needed to not be talked about like a burden behind closed doors. I needed someone to look me in the eye and say, "You're still one of us." But you couldn't even give me that. He turned back to the sink, muttering, "Your mother was the only one who ever wanted to keep digging this hole. She just didn't have the stomach to finish the job." My throat clenched. "Then I'll finish it for her." Daniel snorted. "You're not the victim here, Olivia. You think just because she wrote you a couple of sad little letters, you get to rewrite the past?" "No," I said, "but I get to walk away from it." They didn't say a word. I looked around the kitchen one last time. The same house I grew up in, the same floor I sat on as a kid while my mom baked Christmas cookies. All of it felt rotten now, glossed over with decades of fake smiles and silent dinners. "I'm not staying here another night," I said. "You can both keep pretending this family's intact. I'm done." I walked out without waiting for a response, grabbed my bag from the guest room, tossed the journals and letters inside, slammed the front door behind me. I didn't cry on the porch. I didn't hesitate at the car. I just got in, started the engine, and drove. No GPS, no destination, just the dull roar of the highway swallowing the sound of everything I was leaving behind. For the first time in my life, I wasn't running toward them. I was running toward myself. I didn't head straight back to Atlanta. Something in me needed to sit still for a second. Not in that house, not in that silence, just somewhere that didn't reek of lies. So I turned off the main road and drove toward town, downtown Chapel Hill. And there it was, just past the bookstore, the little cafe my mom used to love, Maplewood and Maine. She'd bring me here on Saturdays when I was a kid, back when it was just the two of us for a couple hours while Daniel was off with Dad. I parked and went inside. The place hadn't changed much. Same chalkboard menu, same crooked lamp in the corner. It smelled like cinnamon and burnt espresso. Familiar, but softer than I remembered. I ordered a coffee and sat near the window. Tried to breathe. Tried not to think about the last 3 days like they'd swallowed up my entire life. Then I saw it. In the far corner, half hidden behind a coat rack and a stack of mismatched chairs, was an upright piano. Brown, scratched, probably hadn't been tuned in years, but it looked exactly like the one she had in our living room. Same missing ivory on the A key, same gold trim. And I walked over slowly, coffee forgotten on the table, ran my hand over the wood. She used to play every Sunday afternoon. Nothing flashy, just soft, simple songs, old hymns, bits of classical music she half remembered. Sometimes she'd let me sit beside her and press random keys. She'd smile and say, "Let the music feel like a thought, not a task." I sat down on the creaky bench. My fingers hovered over the keys. I hadn't touched a piano in years, but I knew what I wanted to play. Just a few notes. The one she always used to start with when the house was quiet, Claire de Lune. I missed half the notes and stumbled through the rest, but it didn't matter. The moment I hit the melody, I felt her. Not in a ghostly way, not in some cheesy spiritual moment, just present, like she was standing behind me, hand on my shoulder, steadying me. People kept talking around me, clinking their mugs and laughing like nothing was out of place. But for a minute, I was back in our living room, her voice humming under the keys, sunlight coming in through the blinds. That memory didn't hurt. It didn't sting like the others. It felt real, untouched. She didn't give me the whole truth in life, but she gave me that. Music, that warmth, her way of holding me together when everything else in the house was falling apart. I finished the song, barely, and stood up. My hand lingered on the top of the piano. She'd been trying to show me love in the only way she could. Quietly, through small things, through the only space she had control over. I walked back to my table, grabbed my coffee, and left. The sun was out now, sharp and hot against my face. I stood on the sidewalk, watching cars crawl by, and felt something loosen in my chest. I couldn't go back and fix anything. I couldn't make them see me. But I could choose something else. I could choose peace. My peace. And I could still carry her with me. Not the secrets, not the guilt, but her. The part that played piano and smiled at me when no one else in the house was watching. I walked back to the car, slid the letter out of my coat pocket, and pressed it to my chest for just a second before starting the engine. It was time to go. Not home. Somewhere new. Somewhere I could finally breathe without waiting for the air to turn cold. The highway rolled under me for hours. I didn't turn on the radio. just the sound of tires on pavement and the steady beat of my thoughts. I didn't cry. I didn't break down. I just drove. When I got back to my apartment in Charlotte, everything was exactly how I left it. Laundry still in the basket, a week-old coffee mug on the counter, a dead plant by the window. But it felt different now, like I was walking into a space that actually belonged to me, instead of some in-between life I was borrowing until my family decided I was worth something. I dropped my bag by the door and kicked off my shoes. My whole body ached, but it wasn't from the drive. It was from carrying that house, that family, on my back for 33 years. And I was done with it. I threw on sneakers and went outside. Didn't even bother grabbing my phone. I just walked. Through the neighborhood, past the corner store, across the overpass where the traffic roared underneath. I didn't have a destination. I just needed to move. Every step felt like peeling off another layer of pressure. The silent rules I lived by, growing up. Don't speak unless you have something useful to say. Don't ask too many questions. Smile at dinner. Be grateful. Grateful for what? For pretending to belong in a house that made me feel invisible? Not anymore. By the time I circled back to my building, the sun was low and the air had cooled down. I was halfway up the stairs when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Kara, someone I hadn't talked to in months. We'd worked together at an education nonprofit years ago, before I gave in to my family's guilt trips and settled for something more stable. She was the kind of person who saw through bullshit fast, but never threw it in your face. Hey, just heard your mom passed. I'm sorry. Also, we've got a spot opening here in Atlanta. I know you moved on, but I thought of you. You'd be perfect. Want to talk? I stared at the message for a long time. If this had come a month ago, I would have said no immediately. Too messy, too risky. My dad would have said it was beneath me. Daniel would have made some snide comment about nonprofit work being cute for a hobby. But none of that mattered now. I replied, yeah, I want to talk. It was the first thing I'd said yes to in a long time that felt like mine. I spent the next few hours clearing out my apartment. Clothes I didn't wear, books I kept just to look smart, things people had given me that I never even liked. It felt like shedding skin. When I sat down to rest, I opened the Notes app on my phone and stared at the name I'd saved a week ago. Rachel Thomas, my mom's cousin. She'd messaged me after the funeral, said she was sorry she couldn't be there, that she'd always admired my mom's strength, and if I ever wanted to talk, she was around. I hadn't answered, not because I didn't want to. I just didn't know how to be someone who had family without all the conditions attached. But I was learning. I typed, "Hi, Rachel. This is Olivia. I'd like to talk. I want to know more about my mom, the side of her I never got to see." I hit send before I could second guess it. Then I leaned back on the couch, looking around at my half-empty apartment, and didn't feel panic. I felt relief. I didn't need my father to write me back. I didn't need Daniel to say sorry. I wasn't going to let them, or their silence, decide how the rest of my life went. I was finally choosing me, and for the first time in forever, that actually felt like enough. The job started fast. New team, new office, new city. I moved into a tiny apartment in East Atlanta, half the size of the one in Charlotte, twice the noise, and still somehow the first place that felt like it was actually mine. The first few days were a blur of onboarding meetings and awkward coffee chats with people who hadn't memorized some fake version of me. Nobody here knew about my father, or Daniel, or the house with the white columns and the cold dinners. I wasn't the Westbrook daughter here. I was just Olivia. And that was enough. At first, I kept waiting for the weight to settle back on my chest, the one that came from years of trying to fit into a life that didn't want me in it. But it didn't come back. Instead, I found myself saying yes more. Yes to after-work drinks, yes to spontaneous weekend plans, yes to laughing at dumb inside jokes I wasn't trying to analyze for hidden judgment. Kara pulled me into the team like I'd never left. She didn't ask for explanations. She just handed me a project file and said, "Make it better. I trust you." And that was all I needed. About 2 weeks in, Rachel replied, "I'd love to meet up. Your mom meant the world to me, Olivia. You deserve to know the version of her we all knew before Chapel Hill." We met at a diner just outside the city. She looked like my mom, same chin, same eyes. But her smile was warmer, less tired. She pulled me into a hug like she didn't need permission. We talked for hours. She told me stories about my mom as a teenager, rebellious and loud, sneaking into jazz clubs, skipping school to read poetry at Piedmont Park. She told me about how she wanted to study music seriously, how she was offered a full scholarship to a conservatory, but gave it up when she got pregnant. She had dreams, Liv. Rachel said, stirring her iced tea. Big ones. She just made herself smaller for that man, for that family. I swallowed the lump in my throat. She never told me any of that? She couldn't, Rachel said. They stripped it out of her, little by little. By the time you were old enough to notice, there wasn't much left for her to share. I sat there, staring at the napkin I'd shredded in my hands. For so long, I thought my mother was just quiet, careful, detached, but maybe she was just surviving. Thank you, I said finally, for telling me, for not pretending. Rachel reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You deserved better. So did she. But you get to have more now. You get to start fresh. That night, I went home and pulled out the old keyboard I'd packed, but hadn't touched in years. I didn't even plug it in at first. I just sat there, fingers hovering, remembering how my mother's hands moved across the piano like they were floating. I played something simple, a chord progression I half remembered from childhood. The sound was rough, uneven, but it was real. It was mine. Over the next few weeks, I kept playing. 10 minutes here, 20 there. Sometimes it felt like meditation. Other times it was a scream I couldn't get out any other way. But every time I played, I felt closer to her. Not the version I lived with in that cold house, but the version Rachel described. The version I could have known. I started writing things down too. Not a journal exactly, just thoughts. Half-formed pieces of myself I hadn't had room for until now. Not to make sense of the past, just to hear my own voice. And the strangest part? I didn't feel alone anymore. Not because I found some magical new family or fixed anything that was broken, but because I finally stopped trying to belong where I wasn't wanted. I was building something new, one day at a time, one choice at a time. And for once, it wasn't about proving anything. It was about becoming whole. Rachel invited me to a family get-together. Her side of the family, my mother's side, the one I never knew. It was a Sunday afternoon cookout, nothing fancy. Backyard folding chairs, paper plates, kids running around barefoot. I stood near the grill, holding a plastic cup of lemonade, feeling awkward until someone tapped my shoulder. You're Margaret's daughter, right? An older woman smiled at me. She used to sing at our church before she moved away, had the softest voice. You sound just like her when you laugh. I didn't even realize I'd laughed. People asked about my job, my apartment, the music I'd started playing again. They didn't ask about my father. They didn't mention Daniel. It wasn't avoidance, it just wasn't relevant. I was Olivia, not an extension of the Westbrook name, just me. Midway through the afternoon, I spotted them, standing off near the fence, dressed in pressed shirts like they couldn't bear to blend in. My father and my brother. They were talking to someone I didn't recognize, but both of them glanced over at me like I was a piece of lint on a black suit. Rachel came up beside me. I didn't know they were coming, she whispered. You okay? I'm fine, I said, and I meant it. I could have walked over, confronted them, demanded closure they'd never give, but I didn't move. Instead, when Rachel introduced me to a small group near the porch, she asked if I wanted to say something about my mom, about finding this side of the family. I nodded, stepped forward. My heart beat hard, but my voice didn't shake. I didn't grow up knowing much about this side of my family, I said, and for a long time, I thought that missing piece was my fault. But it wasn't. The truth is, I was raised in a place where I was taught to shrink, to stay quiet, to make sure I didn't cause any trouble. I've spent the last few months trying to undo that. People were listening, not judging, just there. I've learned I don't need anyone's permission to be myself. I don't owe silence to people who didn't value my voice. My mother was more than the role she was forced into, and so am I. I didn't look at my father. I didn't need to. 2 days later, I got a typed letter from him in the mail. 4 sentences, cold, passive-aggressive, a jab at public displays and attention-seeking behavior. I didn't respond. I folded the letter in half, dropped it in the trash, and poured myself a glass of wine. Then I sat at my keyboard and started to play. I didn't play for him, or for her, or for the version of me I used to chase. I played for me, and it felt like breathing.